Hey, folks, welcome to the second episode of the 21st Century Blues podcast. I'm Tim, and today I'm joined by Kevin Holt, an independent business consultant slash teacher who used to work as an actual teacher, used to work for some of the top leading firms known around the world. And now he kind of lives abroad in different places and helps you streamline your workflows, boost productivity. Yeah, I'm sure that Kevin will tell us a little bit more about himself. But first, let me just briefly introduce the topic that we'll be covering today. We'll be discussing the downfall of postmodern romance and relationships, focusing on things like, dating apps, also focusing a little bit on topics such as maybe OnlyFans, pornography, and sharing maybe some practical examples and actual experiences, either our own or our friends, of how this kind of plays out in the real world. So, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. And yeah, before we begin, is there anything you'd like to add to this introduction?
No, it's perfect. I'll just add that I've been living in Bali since 2021. So
Hmm.
I don't like the term digital nomad. I feel like it's one of those trendy things. Oh, I'm a digital nomad, so I don't say it. But if you're going to make the argument, that's essentially what I'm doing. I was working remotely from Bali and sort of going to Thailand every once in a while for
Hmm.
visa runs, but I'm initially from Switzerland.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. So, yeah, we have quite a topic today. I think it's
Yep.
one that's it's very complex. It's very multi-layered. It's not, it's very hard to tackle it in 30 minutes, which we've kind of allotted, which is the time that we've allotted for this discussion. But we'll give it a go. And I actually did write an MA thesis on the perception of love and romance in the postmodern age. So let's say from the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. And I did a lot of research also in areas that I didn't end up including in the thesis. So I did a lot of research in like things such as digital communication and how this has progressed into dating apps and how this is impacting everything, as well as the impact of pornography on basically anybody who watches pornography, and consequently anybody who watches pornography and wants to form some kind of actual genuine human relationships with other people, with the other sex especially. That just leads to so many weird expectations, so many weird things because obviously pornography very often will not give you the actual picture of what the actual real thing is about, or when it does, it usually isn't the pornography that gets really popular, that people are, I guess, very into. So I'm interested in what your experience is, Kevin, and why we've decided to discuss this particular topic today with you.
Well, on the topic of pornography, I was actually hoping to learn a bit from you because, quite frankly, it's not an area I have studied in any
Mhm.
detail. As I'm a guy, I'm an occasional consumer of pornography. I've not looked into what this may actually be doing in terms of my relationships with women. So, I would maybe ask you later if you could expand a little bit about that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I guess it's part of most people's lives now. I mean, we all. How old are you, Tim, by the way?
I'll be 33, I guess about 2 months from when this episode goes live.
Okay, so I'm a little older, so I'm 42, and I remember the pre-internet days where it was super difficult to get pornography, and the only way I could get it was kind of, one of the first ones I saw was my parents. I managed to sneak into their bedroom, and they had a magazine. But now it's just so easy, right? Now kids are growing up,
Mm.
they become sexually aware at 12, 13, 14, whatever the age is, and they can just go online and see all basically anything, stuff that we would never, when I was a kid, was never even exposed to really. So I've never really thought about how that might impact people, but I'm sure, I mean, as you've researched, it must have a big impact. I'm a little curious to know more.
Well, it's interesting because we're already transitioning into this online aspect, right? And it's a lot of like, I mean, in my research, a lot of what I've uncovered to be kind of the root causes of this downfall of romance and relationships in the current times is this prevalence of digital communication and the accessibility of the digital. On the one hand, we have pornography, where basically you have access to, like, it's on the one hand giving you unrealistic expectations of what sex and relationships will look like in the real world. And then on the other hand, it's giving you that satisfaction that makes it less important for you to actually look for that satisfaction in the real world, because you already are getting it. And because it's so over the top, usually you will often get, I mean, I don't know, but you will often get people. I think porn addiction has become a serious issue in the current age. And but then on the other hand, you have, I mean, if it's not porn, if it's just the other aspects of the digital that are impacting this, it's social media. It's, platforms such as Instagram, which is that's less direct, because that's just has a very profound impact on how we identify ourselves and how we identify ourselves in relation to others. Because of all the possible filters, it's difficult to get much more swayed and be less objective about the idea of beauty and the idea of attraction to a particular individual, because it's not realistic. Social media usually doesn't give you the real picture, whether that's filtered or edited photos or curated photos to show only the really good aspects of a relationship, of a trip, whatever. But then you have things like dating apps, right? Like Tinder, which I don't know. I think that you mentioned that you had some experiences with that, and maybe we can start talking about Tinder and your experience a little bit, and then I can share some of my own experiences, I guess, and then a very positive experience that I know from a few friends who are actually in a long-term relationship right now after meeting on Tinder.
Yeah. That's me too as well. I met my current girlfriend on
Oh,
Tinder
cool.
eventually. But so a bit of backgrounds. I got married when I was about 31 or so. And so this time I was single before, there was no Tinder. I mean, yes, there was still kind of like online dating, but it was still a little bit fringe. It wasn't as common. And I was with her for 10 years. I mean, got married at 31, but I met her at 26.
Mm.
And then we got divorced when I was about 36. So I was immersed into the single scene, and it would obviously change so much in 10 years. So all my friends were like, yeah, Tinder's a new thing. You should try Tinder. So I did. And, I had kind of a mixed experience. I mean, I've had some really good experiences, and then other times where, it's generally the case that most women have like 900 times more matches than men do. So it seems a bit more one-sided and a little less interesting from that perspective. But I think it's like, I just think if you want to meet someone on Tinder, you just have to be a bit more persistent, maybe be a bit different. It's a lot of searching. I mean, I remember I would search through like a lot of matches before I finally met one where I felt like I had a connection. So I did that for a couple of years, just like, you know, mixed, like I said, mixed results. And I was in different countries that gave me different experiences. For example, I had much better results in Poland than I did in Switzerland. Go figure. Um, but then eventually I met my current girlfriend, who's an American. And interesting story, we actually met over distance because it was during COVID.
Mhm.
And when everyone got locked down, a lot of people just sort of went back on Tinder, and I did the same thing. I was just bored, and I hadn't been using it for several months. I was sort of taking a break, but then I went back on Tinder, happened to match her, and yeah, it was a bit weird because I thought, why did you put your location in Switzerland if you're in the U.S.? And there was a reason for it because she had been there previously and a few months before and didn't update the settings, blah blah blah. But yeah, ended up turning into a genuine connection. So it is possible to meet someone and connect genuinely on Tinder. It's just a lot of
Mhm.
work and patience. And but this was 5 years ago, so I think it's probably even more different today from what I'm hearing from friends. It's like even more, I don't know, even more superficial is the word, or just yeah, harder to connect these days is what they're telling me. I don't know if you've had
Mhm.
that experience.
I mean, truth be told, I've actually never used Tinder or another dating app. I just think that it's personally not for me. I think also I think the time when I got like a powerful enough smartphone to support anything like that kind of coincided with my starting to write the MA thesis already. So it was like, kind of I was kind of immersed in the research ever since I started using that phone properly, and it just kind of felt wrong to use Tinder. And then obviously most of the time was during COVID, where it was kind of difficult to just to connect with anybody, either online or through Tinder or in person or anything. So I've never actually used it, but I do have friends, as I mentioned, that I have a friend who met his girlfriend over Tinder, and she's now become a really, really great friend as well. And I love both of them, and they've been together for quite a while now, and they have a really healthy, stable relationship. And you're saying that you're having really good experiences from Tinder, and I've heard from a friend.
Eventually.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah.
But also you said that this was 5 years ago, so we can't really say for certain if the situation
Yeah.
is the same right now. You also said that it's different depending on the country, right? You said that you had a better
For me,
experience.
it was.
Yeah.
For me, it was different by country. Yeah.
Well, I heard from a friend that the way that Tinder is used, for example, here in Slovenia, where I'm from, that it's used a bit differently to how it's used, for example, in the US, where in the US it's used predominantly as a hookup app. Whereas in Slovenia, for example, a lot of people use it to like meet new people and connect with new people, whether that be, sexual or you end up being friends. So I
Yeah.
know people who've gotten really good friends that they met on Tinder or another dating app. And I know people who've gotten really stable relationships from Tinder or from dating apps. So it's definitely not, it's weird. It's kind of paradoxical. It's counterintuitive that you would say, oh, because you have more access to X, this will make it less likely for you to have X, right? Because you have more access to people, you have more access to relationships, you have more access to sex, for example. So why is there a downfall if we have more access to that, right? It's kind of paradoxical, but it's I guess it's paradox. A lot of things about technology and the benefits of technology are kind of paradoxical as we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it a little bit before. I think part of you mentioned how there's internet and there's access to everything now. Part of the problem might be this idea that people are now just looking for unicorns all the time. Like they're looking
Mhm.
for this perfect idealized mate. And if they're not ticking, all 27 boxes that they wrote down in their journal and put under their bed as their ideal partner, then they're just not going to bother, right? And like you
Mhm.
said, there's porn. Okay, if I don't meet my ideal partner, I'll just stay single and watch porn. And it's just this illusion of there being endless supply of mates, but that is an illusion.
Mhm.
There isn't, right? You're at some point. I think every relationship is work at some point. Like you're not going to find this person that's like zero work and that ticks every box. And most of the time, even if you do, like my experience and that of friends, it doesn't even last. It's this kind of illusion that there's this like perfect person. So I think it takes work, and I think part of it is being able to maybe maintain a relationship with somebody that doesn't tick all the boxes. Maybe they only tick 70% of them. Is that good enough?
Mhm.
Well, you have to decide for yourself if 70% is good enough, or if I'm going to stay single and then just watch porn and then just wait for this imaginary 100% unicorn. And I think maybe that's part of it.
That was a really great answer. This was actually something that I wanted to mention initially, right? It's not just that Tinder and similar dating apps allow you to customize your profile to fit, to kind of they enable you to be dishonest about who you are and how you present yourself, but they
Mhm.
also enable you the same level of customization to who you're looking for, right? And I guess they're connected. The this illusion of choice and of a bit of the endlessness of potential partners is what makes it possible for you to raise your standards when looking for a mate, right? Because you have so many options, because there are so many options, and you feel like, oh yeah, I mean, and I'm matching with all of these very attractive people. Of course, I can raise my standards a little bit because I'm actually positively matching with them, right? Why wouldn't I raise my standards if people who meet my standards are actually matching with me? But that differs greatly if it's used for hooking up or if it's used for looking for long-term relationships. So, even just the topic of dating apps, which is just one aspect of what we wanted to discuss today, is super complex and multi-layered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Uh, So another thing that I wanted to talk about, so we talked about maybe positive experiences of dating in the modern era, but
Mhm.
I'd like to maybe also mention the experience of a friend of mine who's, I guess, around the same age as you, and he has a child. I think he's a teenager now, his kid, and he had a lot of problems with the divorce, with getting custody, and basically, obviously he wasn't always the best person, he wasn't always the best partner, he wasn't always the best father, but like from where we started hanging out, I could see that he was really trying and that he was really not like he told me about some of the things that he did before, and I could see it was very clear that this is not the person that he is anymore.
Yeah.
He's doing better. He's still not perfect, but you can't do it overnight. You can't improve yourself to perfection. You can't remove all of your blemish. You can't just, enhance yourself like this 100% overnight. He was doing better, he was improving, but his ex was just having none of it and just being very uh inconsiderate and one-sided in all the settlement discussions and the whole custody fight. And it was like to the point where it seemed more important to get back at him than to make sure that the kid, that the son is taken care of. It was like, oh yeah, we've decided that we'll move to this new city because this is better for the family. And it's like, yeah, but he's been going to school here for a few years now. He has friends here in this school, and his dad lives literally 3-minute walk away from school. It's not one-sided, right? And I think
Yeah.
she did end up getting most of what she wanted. So she did end up winning the custody battle. But then he recently told me, like the last time we spoke, he told me that yeah, he's actually now quite happy that he's accepted the way she kind of organized everything, and he's accepted the way that she gets to spend more time with their son. That's okay with him. But then he's like,
Mhm.
then she asks him, oh yeah, could you maybe take care of him this weekend? And he's like, well, but this is not my weekend. We agreed that you will have him this weekend, and you wanted to have him more weekends. So, I don't really see. And he said that it was something like that he felt like she realized what she had done and she kind of regretted her decision. And also like because this was happening in the son's formative years. So let's say from when he was around 7 or 8 to his 12 years or something, that also had a major impact of his development, right? And he also like I mean, I don't want to be mean to anybody, but she basically what he said was like, yeah, so now she's realizing that that he has a lot of characteristics that she has, the son has a lot of characteristics that she has, and she doesn't like that. And she like the more he grows up, the less the more she sees these negative characteristics, and the less keen she is on spending a lot of time with him and on taking care of him as on her own. And he's like, yeah, obviously, right? So there's I mean, I don't know, I guess this is a total outlier, but it's not the only story that I've heard that's like this. And it's happened to someone that I've been very close to. I
You mean
think
messy divorces?
messy divorces, and messy divorces are one thing because messy divorces can be messy even when there are no kids involved. But I think that
Yeah.
when there's even one child involved, the child should be the priority, not your own fancies, your whims, your grudges, your resentments. But we should be team players. Even if we're not together, we should be team players for the sake of our kids. So that's why I love instances where, like, yeah, we broke up, we're not together anymore, and maybe one of the parents is with a new partner. but they're still like, yeah, we still have a nice relationship. You can still tell your mom about your dad and speak to them in a nice manner and vice versa. You don't need to lie about, you don't need to lie about your mom having a new boyfriend or your dad having a new girlfriend, because that just sucks. I mean,
Yeah,
especially if you're like, I think very, very rarely is it ever the case that it's the child's fault for a divorce, for a breakup, for friction in the relationship. But very often the child will kind of internalize this guilt, depending on where they are in their psychological development. But I think that very often it can be very destructive. I know that my parents broke up when I was like 14. And it was like I was just old enough to know that, yeah, something stupid such as running away wouldn't really do much, but I was not mature enough to process it properly. And it was very difficult, and also it happened exactly in that time when I was kind of starting to discover relationships and attractions, being much more attracted to the opposite sex than I was before, so like before the age of 12, let's say. So it was really difficult because it also kind of skewed my approach and my expectations of what romance and relationships should be. Because I was like, okay, if I ever have a kid, I know that this right now that I'm going through is super painful, and if I ever have a kid that I love, I would never want to put them through something like this. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, now from the get-go, I have to start looking for a partner that I could be with like indefinitely, which is, I think, quite destructive and detrimental when you're like 14, 15, because then you miss out on a lot, then you miss out on a lot of people that are quote unquote wrong for you, but you're
right.
supposed to be with people who are wrong for you from time to time, right? You
Yeah,
can't just expect, because let's face it, there are more people who are wrong for you than there are people who are right for you. It's just the way the world works, unfortunately. So like if you're inexperienced and go into a relationship with someone who's supposedly right for you or close to right for you, you give yourself less of a chance to make it work if you haven't tried your hand at relationships with people who weren't such a good fit for you. And you might compromise the good relationship more because of your inexperience in bad relationships because you were avoiding them. So I'm kind of a textbook example of this, I guess.
yeah. I mean, like you said, the wrong people who are wrong for you in some way are also right for you, right?
Hmm.
Because you meet someone wrong for you, okay, then you learn, all right, I don't want this, 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 and this in a partner. So then when you meet someone that's relatively nice, you can also appreciate them better. Oh, they don't have those things. Like
Hmm.
you know, they're much better for me. So it's this kind of learning. It's always like a learning process. That's why I was saying I think relationships should be work, because if they're not work, I don't really know what you're learning and what you're growing from if it's too easy. So I'm not saying it should be horrible, but there should be at least some disagreement and maybe you grow together. But yeah, topic of divorce, man, divorce just, I mean, it just sucks. I think for me, divorce is worse than the death of my father in terms of what it took emotionally. Because my dad died suddenly when I was 29. He died in an accident. So it was like suddenly he was gone. And that was tough. But I would say the divorce was worse because it is like a death, because you kind of merge a little bit with the person you're married and you have the families together and then you grow to closer with the family and then all of a sudden that's just all dies, it all just goes away. And it's in the way it's worse than death is that it also carries this rejection with it. My dad just died, he didn't reject me, but my ex-wife like basically just said, get out of here, I don't want to be with you anymore, right? So it's like the ultimate rejection. So yeah, it sucks. I was lucky in my divorce. I mean, I've heard stories like you had the story of your friend that sounds pretty awful. I have a couple of close friends that had really, really awful, messy divorces. They came out of it essentially bankrupt. One of them, she somehow stole all of his money over the 40 years they were together, and then somehow still ended up with him having to pay her a crap load of money at the end. But it's not always the men that get screwed because I also have a story about a friend of our family, and she was, the wife was the earner, the guy wasn't, and he completely screwed her over as well. Like just won't pay child support, and somehow she's got to
Mm.
pay him alimony. It's just really crap.
Wow.
But I count my blessings that mine was relatively easy. We didn't have kids, so that makes it way easier, first of all. And there was not really any fight. We just knew it was over. I said, all right, this is over. There's no saving it. Let's just do the thing and then and move on. So
Mm.
quite fortunate in that regard.
Yes.
Little damage, long run damage.
Yeah, sounds like a like the mature way of doing divorces, right? Like as you said, it's probably a very an alleviating factor that you didn't have children involved, so that was probably what made it easier to have it be such a smooth divorce. I'm also it's very interesting that you mentioned that you mentioned it twice now that every relationship should be work because this was actually one of the main conclusions that I got in my MA thesis that I mentioned in the beginning. So,
Hmm.
I was analyzing these two concepts mostly of happily ever after and the concept of the one, which I kinda deemed to be the main culprits behind this downfall of, because I was kind of going from the other direction, from Hollywood, from movies, from songs, from pop music, from poetry, and how all of that kind of transformed and to start to promote this postmodern idea of love and relationships to children as early as as when they see their first Disney princess movie, I guess. And the two
Hmm.
conclusions were so we will have more than the one throughout our lives, right?
Yep.
It's one of the simplest things to assume is that yeah, it doesn't mean that the concept of the one doesn't exist. It's just not so final. It's just not so eternal. It's not something that should or will always necessarily last a lifetime. It might for some people, but in most cases, it'll be like, okay, because we also change, right? Because I'm not the same person that I was
Exactly.
a year ago, and maybe a person that would be right for me today would not be right for me 2 years ago. So this was one thing. So the one is not uniform, and the other thing was that happy ever after does exist if you put in effort and work into it, right? You can't, happy ever after basically is the concept. Okay, okay, I'll find a girl, I'll marry her, and then things will just magically work out and everything will be awesome after that. But it's like, no, okay, you'll find a girl, you'll marry her, and then you'll have to work. So there's still happy ever after, but it should include and it should involve all the hardships, all the effort, all the challenges, all the obstacles, the fight, the love, the near breakups, the making up part. I think that all of that goes into it. And I think that all of this is just encapsulated in what you said, that every relationship should be work.
Yeah, I have this exact same debate with my partner all the time about this idea of the one, because I don't know, it'd be nice to have a woman's take on this, but I'm sure she's going to side with the girlfriends about, yeah, there's a storybook romance, it's there, it's out there for everybody. And and I go, well, show me,
Mhm.
show me a married couple where it's the one. And she swears she knows one. She back, back home, she knows these two people that they found the one and they have this blissful relationship. And I say, great. I'm glad there's an example. I personally haven't seen one. I've seen good relationships. I've seen healthy marriages, but not this idyllic storybook, everything's always roses situation. They've got ups and downs. They go through financial trouble, health trouble, and then they have different approaches to things. There's inevitably going to be a little bit of conflict at times. It's just not always roses. But
Mhm.
yeah, it doesn't matter. She still says there's a one out there. And I'm like, well, then you're with the wrong guy because, you know, you're telling me there's one out there, but I'm not the one. So keep looking. Yeah. And
Yeah,
almost everyone I know my age has been divorced. The only couples I know that are still with their partner are either ones that met when they were like 15 and never separated, or ones that met much later, like late 30s and 40s. They're still married. But almost everyone I know who met their partner in their 20s is divorced now, probably 80%.
but the ones that met them when they were younger than 20 are a lot of them are still together.
They're still together. And then the question is, did you actually meet the one and you happen to just grow in the exact same timing, the exact same way? all the time, or do you just decide not to grow and stick together? I don't know, right?
But also the one is not just, I guess it's not just something you find, but it's also something that you can create or you can become. You know,
Mm,
it's not set in stone, just as the concept of the one and the concept of the happy ever after are not set in stone. You being the one or a relationship becoming a relationship between two the ones, it doesn't necessarily need to start off this way, right? It can become this way down the line, or rather, if every relationship is or should be work, then this should be a component of, it's we can just determine if you are the one for me based on initial infatuation. We can
mhm.
determine it based on how the relationship plays out and how different aspects of our personalities impact the relationships, and how healthy the relationship is after all of this impact. So there's all of these different layers that I guess if we wanted to get really deep into all of that, we would have to organize another discussion, because I think that this one is kind of drawing to a close. But if you
Okay.
want, Kevin, we can totally revisit this conversation and maybe talk a little bit more and expand upon the topics that we opened up today, or maybe have dedicated discussions for, maybe we could have a dedicated discussion for pornography and dating apps and these things, and then another where we open up things more and talk more generally about marriage, divorce, and what we can do and what we're seeing now and what we can do about it, if we want to kind of alleviate the negative aspects in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess I'll just close with this a quote I heard from someone one time about this topic. And she said, "You choose those that choose you." So maybe this idea of the one is just simply who you keep choosing. Every day you keep choosing this person. Maybe it has nothing to do with storybook or fate or divinity. It's just about choice. Maybe.
I
We're all
think I think
theorizing.
there's a lot to it. I think that was beautifully said. I love that quote, and it's right. It's mutual choice. So
Yeah,
you choose those who choose you, and those who choose you are choosing you, and you're choosing them, right? And
right,
it's
right.
reciprocal, and it is again. It implies this work, right? I choose you. It's not just something. Oh, I
Exactly.
noticed you, and I'm so smitten by you, by your appearance, by your looks, by your vibes, I guess. Even that this is usually the concept of the one, right? It's not that I'm so attracted to you, but the energy that you give off is so attracted to the energy that I'm used to my whole life, that I feel like I found home or something like that. But it's choice. It's every day I choose you. Every day I wake up and I'm like, okay, this is a person that I care about, and I want to invest my time and effort into making their lives just ever so slightly better.
Yeah. Like, yeah, we've been through some hard times, but you know what? I still choose you. I think
Mhm.
it's comes down to that.
And I think that
Yeah.
this is the perfect note to end this really great conversation on, Kevin. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining me
Tim.
today.
I
It
enjoyed it.
was
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome to discuss this with you, and I really like that it's given me you've given me the opportunity to speak a little bit more about my master's thesis, because I finished that during COVID, so I never really got to brag about it or discuss it publicly in such detail and in such depth with anybody. So yeah, I'm totally up for doing another episode sometime in the near future. And yeah,
Sure.
thanks so much, Kevin, again.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Pleasure being here. Thank you.
And to everyone listening, that's all for today, folks. Have a great day, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you next time.